this is an awesome event. This was not around 5 years ago when I got started, so yeah, this is awesome. My story is that I started in an extremely non-sexy manufacturing business doing offshore manufacturing. And all I knew was all these really strange and complex intricacies of government procurements and very unsexy stuff. So when I got fired by that private equity firm who bought that company, I said, well, I think I'll start a tech company. And I just brought on a CTO, and what's the first thing? How many people here are starting a company? What's the first thing that you do? The foundation put it up earlier. On the second slide, you build a PowerPoint, and on the second slide, you put a hockey stick. So I built this beautiful PowerPoint presentation. I knew only manufacturing, knew nothing about tech. And do I have slides here? Here we go. And I go out to, where do you go? Bay Street. And so I was living on King Street West, and every day I'd get on my bicycle and bike down to Bay Street and change in the lobby and go up to one of those really high floors and whip out my iPad and tell them about my multi-million-dollar idea with this huge hockey stick and pitch them for money. And over the course of 6 months, I basically got no every single day, right? Like, look at this hockey stick, this market's massive, it's $1 billion government procurement market globally. Like, no, 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 no. And they're probably looking at me going, how the hell is this chick gonna do this? So it was a lot of no's. So finally one day, I get a call from my first angel investor. You find out quick why they're called angels, right guys? So my first angel investor's like, he's the guy that had the first rights to Facebook ads. He said, Nicole, I know nothing about defense procurement. I know nothing about government contracting, but I know when it comes to digitization, it's never a question of if, it's always a question of when, and you seem to know this sector, you have this domain expertise. So, okay, here's my angel investment, and I'll introduce you to some venture capitalists. So he calls me up one day and he says, Nicole, I have amazing news. This venture capitalist has decided to finally go ahead based on your big market and hockey stick. He's gonna call tonight. So he calls me, he goes, Nicole, you need to go out and buy yourself a bottle of wine and call up all your friends. And of course, by this point, I had no friends left. And I go to the wine rack and I buy myself a bottle of wine. And I'm going to the cash register to pay for the bottle of wine, and the phone rings and it says Bay Street Boy, because they're all the same, right? And I pick up the phone and he says, Nicole, I had approval to go ahead based on this huge market and everything you showed us. But actually, we got a phone call from this guy who had been in the sector for 40 years. He knew the industry. And he said that your industry is exempt, that actually it will never change. So we lost out on that deal, but that was the moment I always think back to, because when you're really angry and you're so broke you can't afford a therapist, that's what you have to channel. And I was able, by not raising that big round of funding, to keep control of the company and to get very, very close to our customer base and iterate along the lines of that customer base and basically raise money, the best kind of money you raise, which is sales, from that customer base. And so that was our pivotal moment in disrupting this sort of non-sexy market. So just a few findings. If anyone hasn't read this book, you should. But when they look back and study some of the greatest innovators of all time, like even Einstein himself, there's always this Hollywood moment, right, where he's looking out of the patent office and sees the trams go by, and he comes up with the theory of relativity in a nanosecond. And they actually analyze what really happened. And actually, every single day on his hour lunch break, he would go to the physics department, and he would collaborate with hundreds of people like you guys, and they would fail 1,000,000 times, and they would work together on this really large and massive problem, which had no Hollywood moment, day in and day out. And How to Fly a Horse is about these two bicycle repairmen who were in Ohio who were trying to figure out how to become the first engineers of controlled flight, the Wright brothers. Everyone knows the photo, they're lifting off, it's a Hollywood moment. But what we missed out is the 6 years before that, where they were collaborating and failing and literally crashing. And what were they doing almost every night in Ohio? Well, what do you do in Ohio? Anyone? You drink. And every night they'd go to the bar, and there was 3 or 4 other people doing the same thing, and they were collaborating and sharing information, which is what this event, I think, is all about, right? So that is, when I think about disrupting older sectors or what everyone in this room is doing, which is innovating, I think about that story instead of the Hollywood moment. So that, to me, is what happens after you don't get the funding. It's all the stuff that comes after. So just this one story I heard is anyone knows Prem Watsa from Fairfax Holdings. He summarized it. So this is him. I don't get the credit for this. And I'm into horses. So he said, Nicole, I knew these two twins. They were identical twins, and they were both raised the exact same way. One of them's an optimist, one of them's a pessimist. The pessimist is given all of the toys in the whole world, and his room is full of toys. And the optimist's room gets filled with manure. And the parents come up the next day after this test, after they give them these two things, and they go to the pessimist. They said, how are you doing? He said, horrible. I have to get all these batteries. I have to fix all these toys. There's just so much stuff to do. And they go into the pessimist's room. His room is literally full of manure. And he said, how are you doing? And he smiled and he said, I know there's a pony in here somewhere. So for me, I think that's the number one thing that we've had to carry through all this essentially shit, which is starting a startup and getting past the first 3, 4, 5 years. So lastly, I'm just going to end on a thought about technology. So I've actually never been here and never spoken at TechTO, so this is amazing. But a lot of the work I've been doing has been with government and talking to government about innovating, which is like, aren't those two things the opposite? And so the number one thing we've been talking about is we need to stop talking about it as a technology sector, in my opinion, because I think that technology's place is in every single sector in this country, and that technology is the key to move them all forward. When the commodity crash happened a year ago, OMX had been working only in really the defense market, and we stepped up and started working with oil and gas companies to help them reduce costs and increase compliance and all this stuff. So it was a big key to, I think, innovating and making every sector more competitive. So kudos to you guys for organizing this, and thanks for having me.
Questions? Stay up there for questions. Questions?
I didn't know there'd be questions.
Hey, Nicole. Nice to hear you speak. It's my second time. And I just want to ask you, how has your leadership style changed from who you were 5 years ago to now?
Oh, interesting. I think some people might call me a control freak. At the beginning, you probably know if you're a founder, you do everything. And I think it's really important to have to empower people as the team starts to grow to basically be founders themselves. So that's been a big shift for me. That's been difficult. But it's been weird because when I did my first startup, we went from 0 to 70 employees in 6 weeks because we got one big manufacturing contract. So I was actually really used to a bigger team.
Wow.
And so I kind of flip-flopped back. But yeah, no, it's very difficult. I think leadership and managing teams is definitely the hardest part.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, hi. Sorry, I'm Julie. I'm from Michael Page Toronto. I'm a technology recruiter. My question for you is, was there ever a time that you thought you would give up? And then how did you get past that time?
Oh yeah, no, totally. There was 10 million times. I think there's 10 million times in every day sometimes. It's pretty funny. My sister is in biology and she studies insects, and she was telling me this story about dung beetles one night when I really thought I was going to fail, and she's like, the dung beetles have been around longer than dinosaurs, right? I was like, oh, I had no idea. You know what dung beetles are? They're like the little beetles that go into like manure. And she's like, the reason they've survived is because they can walk backwards and forwards with huge piles of shit on their back. So it's basically, it's not glamorous, right? I think that's, to me, the more I look at it and read about other founders and what they've gone through, it's actually just this ability to go through a huge amount of pain. Sounds great, right? Is that it? Oh, no.
Last question.
Oh, sorry. When you didn't get your dough, what did you do, and how close to the hockey stick were you?
Well, the hockey stick just looked a little different. It was kind of like a spiral that went down and up. What did we do after we didn't get the dough? I mean, I read a really great article in BetaKit today about optionality, and I think that's been a key in my life. Is I always had this huge whiteboard in my dining room where there was like 6 parallel tracks, so nothing ever rested on one deal or one guy or you never want to live your life just relying on one Bay Street boy, right? So there was always backups, and we basically combined government grants. I hustled for sales, and friends, family, angel investments. We sort of cobbled together what we could, and I think things have changed now, but back then it was all about like your seed round and your Series A, and it was all about these fabricated dates that things would close. But we basically just took like 5 small $40,000 rounds, and then we're over with it and focused on sales and lots of government grants and stuff too. But yeah, thanks for having me.